Hey, good afternoon, and welcome to Mark and Mark in the Midday. I'm here with my buddy Mr. Littell once again, and today we've got ourselves a great guest, another former teammate of Mr. Littell, so I'm going to throw it over to country, and why don't you introduce our guest?
Well, Dane Iorg is a real special person to me because not only was he a really good ball player at many stages of his career, but I had the opportunity to room with Dane, and we're very good friends. So I know a little bit about Dane. He knows a little bit about me. So this is going to be a really interesting interview today. Dane lives out in the great state of Utah. He's from Highland, Utah, and I can say that it is a beautiful state because I've been there many times myself. But Dane was a hitter, and he had some very interesting stats that I'm going to let my partner bring up as we go along in this talk. But Dane, how you doing?
Hey, good. I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day in Utah. The sun's shining, hardly a cloud in the sky. It'll be about 85 degrees today, and my wife and I, Gay, just got out of the garden. She had me pull up some they weren't weeds, they were deal that she planted, and they kind of overtook the garden, so we were out there pulling them up. So got a good start today.
Well, it sounds like good pickle making to me anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the dill. But with the dill, in fact, let's talk about when you started. What year was that you signed with the Phillies?
I signed in 1971 after my junior year at Brigham Young University, and so I came up through the Philadelphia organization.
Yeah.
Now, Dean,
and I'll say one thing, Mark, if you don't mind. I know Dallas Green passed away a few months ago. Did you know Dallas, Mark?
Yeah, I had met him, and I heard he was a great guy.
Yeah, and he was a great guy. I remember the talks he used to give the minor leaguers down in Clearwater Beach, Florida, in the clubhouse there. He had a booming voice, but I really felt sad when he passed away because he was a great baseball man and very instrumental in my baseball career. So just wanted to bring his name up.
It's definitely a good name to bring up. He was great at player development for sure, and probably responsible for a lot of the talent in those great Philly teams in the 70s and 80s, without a doubt. Now, you left Brigham Young after your junior year because you were drafted in the first round. I believe it was 22nd overall by the Phillies. But prior to that, you were drafted out of high school by Kansas City, which was interesting because they drafted you in '68. It was the year before they even had a team on the major league field. Did you feel that was one of the reasons why you decided to go to Brigham Young, or because you just felt like you needed some more seasoning and didn't think that the minors were going to help?
No, Mark, I was, Kansas City drafted me, and I wasn't really seriously considering starting professional baseball at that time. I was immature. I came from a little tiny town way up in Northern California called Blue Lake, population 1,000, spent a few years at BYU, and I just, I didn't feel I was ready to tackle professional sports after high school because, I was kind of in way up in Northern California, right on the Pacific Ocean, right in the middle of the redwood trees, and I didn't think I had enough exposure to life to be able to handle that situation.
They swung axes up there, Mark, a lot rather than baseball bats too, so he might have been a little dangerous.
Dropped a lot of wood.
Split hairs, but not baseballs, in other words.
Yeah.
The Owls were protected, but everybody else was not. So
the government protected the Owls, Mark. Nobody else did.
There you go. So you got to the Phillies at an interesting time, at least in their minor league in the early 70s. That was a time when Philadelphia was really stockpiling a lot of talent, the Larry Bowas of the world, Greg Lazinski, some guy named Schmidt. Tell us a little bit about the people you played with in the minor league system when you were with Philly.
Well, actually, they were a little bit ahead of me. Well, Mike Schmidt was in the draft, but same draft that I was in. But I think he went to double A or triple A ball. I started out in Walla Walla, Washington in the low A league. It was kind of a college league, and all the players were drafted in college who started the professional
Well, you ripped
career
up
later.
Walla Walla, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, it was and I liked Walla Walla, but really all those guys were probably already in the big leagues when I arrived in the big leagues, and so it was an established team, and it was I really liked the organization. They treated me well, but it was really hard to break in with that organization simply because, as you stated, Mark, they had so many great ball players. And when you're a winning team, it's hard for rookies to make the team unless you're really, really outstanding. So it was difficult.
I was going to say, because they were stockpiling talent, and if those guys were like that step ahead of you, to get past them obviously was really tough, but you were doing your share. I mean, you were ripping up the minor leagues, 367 at Walla Walla. You hit 300 the next year. I mean, you were moving. It wasn't like you were being held down by talent. You were just being held down because the team was top heavy.
Well, I like to think that might be true, but I struggled a little bit too. I mean, it's a tough adjustment going to professional baseball, as Mark will tell you, because there's a lot of talent there, and guys are serious and they're playing hard, and they're working hard, they're trying to get better, and so it's a real rat race in the minor leagues. I mean, I'm telling you, people don't understand. I can't tell you how many sleepless nights I had in the minor leagues. I could, you go 0 for 4 in a game or 0 for 8 in a doubleheader. I remember that's happened to me once, and all night long, all you see is baseballs come. You can't get any rest, can't get any sleep. You're dead tired when you go to the park the next day because you're always worried about what you did yesterday, and you try to concentrate on the the game at hand. Then maybe that night you go 3 for 4, and things are starting to work out well for you. But you can't sleep that night either because you're so excited you got 3 hits, and so there's a lot of pressure. People don't understand it maybe, but and then your statistics are always out there for everybody to see. The thing you can say about baseball is stats don't lie. I mean, if you're a bad hitter, it'll show up in the stat line. If you're a bad pitcher, it'll show up in the stat line. And I'm sure, Mark can say the same thing. It's pressure.
Yeah, it's quite a challenge to go out there and do this day in and day out and try to calm yourself to where you can, throw a baseball or hit a baseball or, get a good jump, out in the outfield off the bat. And, it's quite competitive. It's at the highest, it's at the highest level. And like you're going out there day in and day out, 140 games in the minor leagues and 162 at the major league level. And you're tested. And you do have a lot of those sleepless nights. And it truly is, pretty much you bleed a little bit and you cry a little bit and you're worried a little bit, but you got to calm down to go back out and do your thing on a day in and day out basis to get you to the level that you truly want to be. Now, once you get to that biggest level, Dane and I both agree, as all professional athletes will agree, it's nice that you got there, but it's hard to get there, but it's harder to stay there. So you're on guard all the time. You're very much on guard and performing. So you've got to find a yin and a yang situation to where you can operate and do that on that day in, day out basis. But Dane, he was aggressive at the plate. He attacked the ball. He followed the pitcher and knew what he did. That's why he was such a good ball player, a really good ball player. And he was fortunate enough to get 2 World Series rings you got.
Yep, 2. 82 at the Cardinals, 85 with the Royals.
Yeah, I think you're one of the few guys that's got a red and a blue ring, and that's pretty darn cool because you had Whitey Herzog, and Whitey was one of your big managers, and as well as myself, and tell us what your thoughts were on Whitey, Dane.
I was thinking about this the other day, Mark. To me, there's not a better manager that ever managed baseball than Whitey Herzog. And he used to tell me, he'd say, hey, the everyday players are taking care. They know what they're going to do out there every day. And so he was really conscientious towards the the bench players, the pinch hitters, the part-time players. And really that's what I was. I mean, Whitey was really, really good to me. He would always let me know, and he would tell me, he said, Dana, he said, I can't expect you to hit if I don't put you in the lineup, a couple times a week. And so you got to stay ready. You got to stay fresh. And Whitey would always tell me, he'd say, hey, Dana, you're in the outfield tomorrow, and he would always let me know in advance. And I thought that was critical. And, we look at pitching now, Mark, and this is what I was thinking about the other day. Whitey was 30 years ahead of himself. I mean, he understood the value of a bullpen. That's why we won World Series, because we had stoppers. We had guys like you. We had, Doug Bear. We had Bruce Sutter. We had guys that, you could bring it, Mark. You threw hard. And that slider you had, and then Bruce with that split finger, and Doug Bear threw hard. I mean, Whitey understood the value of a bullpen before anybody else in baseball. I remember I'd go to spring training, and I bet you remember this as well, Mark. He'd stand in front of the club, and he'd say, hey, guys, we only have to beat them for 7 innings. After 7 innings, we're ahead. We'll put the final nail in the coffin with our bullpen. And he knew the value of setup men. He knew the value of a stopper. And, we always won those games. And now I look at how relievers are catered to. And, you look at a guy, a closer, they call him now, a closer in the bullpen. He throws 1 inning. Well, Bruce Sutter, he would many times come in the 8th. He'd go 2 innings. And that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. And you threw there, and all these guys, and Whitey really he was way ahead of his time, if you ask me. I never played for anybody that understood the game as well as Whitey Herzog. He was the best manager, hands down, no question, of anybody that I ever played for.
Well, I can agree with that, because he was always 3 to 4 innings ahead of the other team. He was always up 3 to 4 innings. If you were down, he knew what he was going to do. If you were up, he knew what he was going to do. If you were even, he knew exactly what was going to happen. And he had that well mapped out. He always had a plan of attack to go out there, well armed, as we might say. But you look at the bullpens nowadays, and that middle relief. If the middle relievers, those 2 or 3 guys, can't bring you through to get to that closer, you're pretty much fried. And you're right.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. And I don't know if you remember this or not, Mark, but Whitey kept meticulous notes. He had everybody charting everything. And, they did it by hand during our season, but he knew tendencies. He knew where guys were hitting breaking balls. He knew where guys were hitting fastballs, and he set up the defense accordingly. I mean, everybody was, the pitchers and the starters, if they weren't starting that day, they were keeping notes. They'd tell you what pitch he hit, where he hit it, and all that stuff was kept by Whitey. So, then would place the defense accordingly. And so, like I said, he was, he's 30 years ahead of everybody else. And plus, I mean, Mark, you liked him, I liked him, everybody liked him because he was a friendly guy. A lot of times you have managers that are standoffish, that think they can't be friends with people. But Whitey wasn't like that. Mark, he used to go bass fishing. Whitey was out there in the boat, it was, but once the game started, everybody understood that he was the boss. He was the manager, and he'd do anything to improve the team. And nobody was safe, but he was just a unique and interesting person who understood the game of baseball better than anybody else in our time.
Well, I tell you what, though, when I was closing for him and my arm was healthy, I wasn't keeping notes. I was down and training the baseball for 2 hot dogs. That was my gig. So in the bullpen. So, I mean, I was getting.
I don't think he'd trust you to keep notes, Mark. He may not trusted you to keep notes.
That's right, exactly. Well, this guy looked like he hit that ball over there, but I don't know. What about that? But we had some really fun times out there, because Dane and I were rooming and we were playing the Phillies, and I said, I'm going to drill the bull tomorrow. He gets up. I said, what are you going to drill the bull for? I said, well, the Bulls are leaning on me. And Bulls never got hit off me, neither did Smith. And for some reason, you know, I pitched pretty good against big guys. I don't know, just whatever, for whatever reason. But anyway, I said, the Bull's leaning on me. He said, you're not going to hit the Bull. You know, I said, yeah, I'm going to hit the Bull. So anyway, I hit the Bull. So, but anyway, you know, Dane
what
was
did
up
the Bull
there.
do when you hit the Bull?
Well, Bull took one knee, like I told Dane. I said, I'm going to bring him to one knee even. And so anyway, Dane was out playing right field, and the Bull came up. I had a runner on first, and it was the ninth inning, and I knew if I hit the Bull, I got runner on first and second, which wasn't a big deal because I got double play in order, and didn't matter to me. But so I turns out that Dane takes his glove off and shakes it and looks down at the crowd and starts shaking his head. And so
I was playing left field that day, Mark. I'll never forget it because you told me before the game you were going to hit the Bull, baby Bull, if he came up, you know, losing. You told me you were going to hit him, and then I see him come to the plate. And sure enough, you buried it right in his back, and he went down. But then he took a couple steps towards you. Remember? I thought, oh no, here we go. And he took a couple steps, and he changed his mind, and he went to first base. But I'll tell everybody, pound for pound, Mark Littell was the strongest man in baseball. I don't care what anybody says. Mark was the strongest man I'd ever seen. I remember one time Mark, you remember that time when Mike Phillips and I tried to tackle you?
Yeah.
It was impossible.
Yeah, it didn't work. You guys are wusses.
Oh.
Lightweight.
He was. And Mark threw hard. Oh, gosh, and that heavy fastball, that heavy slider. Nobody wanted to face Mark. And plus, he was kind of crazy. You didn't trust him.
Yeah, it was
Did
completely
you
wild.
ever face him before you were teammates?
No, I never did, but I knew about him. And, you know, I mean, Mark didn't think twice about, you know, throwing one up and in on you. And like he said, you know, if you lean over the plate, you're going to pay the consequences. And that's the way the game was played a little bit more then, I think. But I don't know today's game, so maybe they still do it. But, you know, I mean, we kept charge. We knew who was hitting. And you know, oftentimes we'd have pregame meetings, you know, and guys were hot. And somebody would say, well, let's see how he hits off his back. And that meant you'd brush, you know, if a guy's real hot, we'd knock him down. We'd see how bad he wanted to hit. And Mark knew this, you know, and that's what pitchers did then. And, you know, the hitters kind of expected it. If you were hot, you know, maybe they weren't going to hit you, but they were sure going to throw one up and in on you and, you know, see if you could get out of the way of it. Don't you think, Mark?
Oh, yeah, we had our share of little, you know, bumps with each team. You know, we'd run out there, and sometimes we'd mingle a little bit, which I think we threw much better punches then than they do nowadays. But I remember Larry Bowa up there, and, you know, when actually the teams came together a little bit, and Larry, you know, Bowa was all hyped up for some reason. And so he was just...
For some reason? Like he was never hyper?
But he was jumping up and down like he was on a little trampoline back there, and he was saying, Cookie boy, Cookie boy. Cookie boy, I remember the next day he came by me on the field. I never talked to opposing hitters. And he said, hey, Country, how you doing? I said, I'm going to drill you. And I just kept walking. I said, I'll never forget that when he said that to me. So, if I'd gotten in the game that day, I would have had the whole plate, I'm sure. But, you know, Dane was in the ALCS, and his brother Garth not only played for the Blue Jays, but he also he coached professionally, coached at the big league level, and he's still doing some things abroad. I think he was in South Africa, and Dane has incredible statistics under fire in the big games. And
he sure does.
Mark, what are some of those statistics? Just fly through them.
You know, you look at them and they just jump right off the plate because, first of all, hitting in the postseason, .522 lifetime batting average. Just in the 82 series alone, you hit .529. And that's with 17 at-bats. You played in 5 games as a DH because the National League, I believe that was the year that they had the DH for the whole World Series, not in the alternating parks. but you out-hit the Brewers DHs, and they had a regular DH because they were an American League team. That had to be really satisfying.
No, it was, Mark. I always prided myself on being prepared for big games, and for some reason, ever since I was in high school, I could, I was a lot better in big games for some reason. I don't know. Maybe my concentration was better. I don't know what it was, but I was really happy with those statistics that I had in big games. I really don't know the reason. I guess, like I say, maybe I was concentrating a little bit better. I really don't know. But always like, and as Mark knows, it's always fun when you play the better teams, the best teams. When we used to play the really, really good teams when we were, whether I was in Kansas City or St. Louis, it's a lot of fun to play the better teams, the best teams, just see how you stack up and see if you can beat them. So, and maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but I did have good stats in postseason. So.
Was there an extra oomph though when you played against the Phillies, considered you came from their organization, and as your team, the Cardinals, was ascending, the Phillies were the top kids on the block in the NL East at that time. Did it feel really satisfying, a little extra, to knock them off and get to the series in '82?
Absolutely. Yeah. That was yeah.
Thank you. I wanted someone to finally admit it feels good to knock off this franchise and let you go.
Yeah, I always liked that. You let them go. You kind of got a vendetta.
Payback, baby.
I don't know. Yeah. I liked it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Showed them, but yeah.
I got a quick question for you. We talked about Whitey and how great he was, and everyone who's talked about Whitey to us on the show says the same thing. So I'm a believer. What about the late great Dick Hauser? Tell us a little bit about him.
Well, Dick was a good manager. He real quiet. I never knew Dick very well. I wasn't very close to the players, but he was a good manager. He was always in control. He was a guy that controlled his emotions, never got too high, too low, and he obviously knew talent. I mean, when I played for Kansas City, our pitching staff was unbelievable. The starters that we had, and then Quisenberry in the pen, and we had a guy named Joe Beckwith. People don't remember Joe Beckwith, but
I do.
Didn't throw as hard as Mark, didn't have, wasn't quite as big and strong and a real fireballer. But I'm telling you what, he was tough to hit. And like Mark says, those setup men, they're invaluable. And Dick understood that too. And so we had Joe Beckwith, and when you put Joe Beckwith in, you weren't going to score any runs off him unless, he made a mistake and he brought in Quiz. It all boils down to pitching, in my opinion, and defense. And, in KC we had really good, and we had George Brett in the middle lineup, the best hitter to ever play the game, if you ask me. And so, he was unbelievable. But Dick was kind of quiet, didn't know him very well. But, I never had any problems with him. And our team played hard, and that goes with character. And I think both Dick and Whitey understood, the importance of good character, people that played hard every single day. And Mark can tell you this. If you got a teammate that doesn't play hard all the time, you don't want him on your team. I don't care how good he is. I don't want to play with the dog. That's what we call them. I don't want to play with those guys. I want to play with guys when they took the field, it was war. And I think both Dick and Whitey understood that. And we always had players that play hard. They didn't play hard, they weren't there. They'd get rid of them, and that was
rid of them.
Do you think
that was
both of those
it. Don't you think, Mark?
it?
Yeah. You want a guy that you want in your foxhole. Which guy do you want in your foxhole? With you during the battle, and that's pretty much what it boils down to. Because you've got fighters, and then you've got guys that just kind of just go through the motions, and you don't want those guys that go through the motions. They go to the P team, and we were always trying to be on the A team. So
I was going to ask you, do you think that both of those guys were like that because they were lunch pail players themselves? I mean, Whitey was a grinder, Dick was a grinder when they played, and that sort of characteristic, were the kind of MEAs onto their team, and those were the kind of guys they wanted.
Yeah, I would say that's absolutely true, and and people understood that. If you didn't want to play hard, I mean, look at Gary Templeton was probably the most talented player I've ever seen. Mark, would you say that he was one of the most talented players you ever seen?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And a good guy, and I really like
Gary.
Gary.
Very good guy. Yes.
But sometimes he came to the park and he was nonchalant. He didn't want to play as hard as Whitey or we thought he should play. Don't you agree, Mark?
Yeah, you nailed it. It's perfect. Yeah.
And
then they traded for Ozzie Smith, and look what happened.
Yeah, and Ozzie played. I mean, Ozzie played so hard. Ozzie was one of the best competitive people. A great guy, a wonderful teammate. But boy, when he took the field, it was 100% all the time. And Whitey understood that, and I thought he made a stupid trade because, like I say, Gary Templeton was the most talented player all around that I'd ever played with. Nobody was better than Gary Templeton as a shortstop, as a hitter, as a runner. And he traded for Ozzie Smith, and Ozzie was a 200, 220 hitter in San Diego, but a great defensive player, and he turned out to be a Hall of Famer. So, that's what set Whitey apart. And when your superstars play hard, and nobody played harder than George Brett, and nobody played harder than Ozzie Smith, when your superstars will play hard, the team will follow. And probably, Dick understood that, and Whitey understood that. No question.
I can say this one thing. I was very blessed with three outstanding shortstops. And I started with Freddie Patek, who was 5 feet 4 inches. And Freddie played 14 years in the big leagues. And Whitey did make the statement, matter of fact, I have it in my book, and he said he thought Freddie was the best turf shortstop that he had ever, better than Ozzie even. And
wow.
So, I mean, Freddie Patek, he could cover some ground. He had a great arm. He's a little big man from Seguin, Texas. I'm sure he took a lot of crap for being 5'4", but to me, Freddie's a 6'8" type guy. He's a great guy as well. And I was blessed with Templeton and Patek and Ozzie and these players. And you see what the top of the line, what they can do when they're under fire, and they make that 5-6 hole play, or they go up the middle, and for some reason they end up turning the double play, and you're watching some magic happen right out there. Everything's in slow motion, and all of a sudden it's done. It's a done deal. And you're out of the inning, you're in the dugout, and the hitters are sitting there saying, the job of a pitcher is to not spend much time out there on that mound. You're spending too much time out on the mound, you're getting hit, and they're scoring runs. So you don't want to spend much time out there. Get your players off the field and let them hit and watch them hit. So that's the thing about baseball. And Dane could definitely hit and under clutch, under fire. And like I said, he's a friend of mine. He was a great ball player. He's got 2 World Series rings. I don't know anybody that's got blue and red World Series rings. But anyway, that's probably going to be a statistic. Sabres are going to have to look at that one, Society of American Baseball Research. But it's interesting stuff. And Dane, he stayed the course, with his life.
He's got a blue ring and a red ring and a red ring.
Who?
I know a guy's got a blue ring and a red ring.
Who's that?
Your former teammate. Well, if you count this Mets ring, Keith Hernandez. He's got a red ring with the Cardinals and a blue one with the Mets.
I'm talking about from Missouri.
I know you are, but I had to throw his name out there.
I know that. And Keith was a nut, and he was a great ball player too. But the funny thing Dane stayed the course. He's got a wonderful family. He has a company called Synergy that he's developed, and it's a big company right now.
Tell us about it.
If you're into health products and things of that nature, and keeping healthy and getting better, you got to look into Synergy because Dane's told me about it, and it takes a while to do that, and that's where Dane's at right now with his company. So, and we're just very fortunate to have the great Dane or Daner on our show today. So, but Dane, thanks for showing up and as you always do, and certainly appreciate it. What you got anything to add to this, Dane, as a closing, or No,
I just, like you said, Mark, I've been in the nutritional business for a long time. I think I have the best products in the world. I look finally back on my baseball career, and a lot of it's because of my teammates, and of course you and I were very close friends, and I always appreciated you and your friendship and the good times we had with each other in spring training and throughout the season. We had a ball together. It was so much fun. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but Hernandez was my roommate the year he won the Most Valuable Player award. That's another story. But anyway, it was a great and it was a great time talking with you guys today, reliving the past. When you get older, you're a lot better than you probably were. But it's a great game. I still like it. I'm still a fan. I love baseball. I don't care about the NFL. Never watched the NBA, but I like Major League Baseball. I like golf. Those are the only two. So thanks for having me, Mark, and I appreciate the time I was able to spend with you two this morning.
Well, we're so glad to have had you on. But before I let you go, I just have to ask you about June 23rd and August 30th, 1986. Do you remember those two dates?
No.
You got to pitch.
I'm sorry.
You got to pitch.
Oh, yeah, I pitched. Was that the time? Was that when I pitched? Oh, God.
Yeah, and I've got to hear about this because I've talked to position players over and over again, and when they talk about the times they got to pitch, it's like the greatest thing that ever happened to them, like a pitcher hitting a home run. They love to talk about those dates. How did you get into those games? Was it Jack McKeon, who was the manager at the time, and he threw you into a game that was a little bit lopsided?
Well, I was a good batting practice pitcher. I mean, those guys used to ask me to pitch to them all the time. I remember George Brett used to say, "Hey, Dane, would you throw batting practice, if I wasn't playing?" And, and I threw really good batting practice. And so Steve Boris actually was our manager in San Diego, and we were getting beat up by the Giants in Candlestick Park at the time in San Francisco. And he said, "Hey, Daner," he goes, I'm running out of pitching. You think you could throw a couple innings? I go, "Oh, God." I go, "Heck yeah, I could throw a couple of innings." And so I'm playing left field. He says, well, go get warmed up, and you're the pitcher next inning. So I ran down the bullpen and warmed up, and he says, "Now listen." He said, "Just throw strikes. Just throw strikes." And I'm going, "Okay, I'll just throw strikes." Well, Mike Lacoste, who pitched in Kansas City, I'm sure Mark knows Mike Lacoste.
Yeah.
He had a home run off of me. And Mark, Mike, he rubbed it in, and he was pitching against us that day. And then another guy, his last name was Leonard, he hit his first big league home run off of me. So I just threw it right down the middle, and I know the umpire was feeling sorry for me. I felt so badly because there was a kid coming up, a young player, and I threw a ball about 8 inches outside, maybe 10 inches, and he called strike 3 on him. And I was really mad at the umpire because that's not fair to a young kid. And so I felt bad about that. And so I pitched that day, and it was horrible. In fact, I gave up 2 home runs, and the next time I came to the plate in the top of the ninth, must have been the top of the 8th inning or something, the fans gave me a huge ovation, and I was the opposing pitcher because I'd given up 2 home runs. I don't think Mark's ever had that happen. And so then I'm going, hey, if I ever pitch again, I'm going to learn something. And so I started throwing a split finger. I saw, Suter showed me how he hold the ball in St. Louis. Right. So I had this split finger, and I struck out a guy, and he looked terrible on this split finger. I was playing for San Diego or in Montreal, and everybody in the infield started laughing. I mean, this guy, I really got him a 3-2 splitter, and he looked terrible. And so all the infielders were laughing. I couldn't help. I couldn't throw anymore because I was laughing so hard on the mound. But I got out of that inning without giving up a run. But boy, I tell you, those hitters are close. It's kind of scary out there on the mound. People don't understand that. Big league hitters, but it was fun.
Excellent. So now I'm going to throw it over to the closer. Country, take us home.
Yeah, and you know what? It's all about closing this game out, but you got to throw P's at the knees, no pies in the eyes, no wall balls, and you'll be just fine.
Take care, everyone.
Have a great one.